Congratulations, you've made it. You finally made it to the last lecture of the course. You should feel good about yourself for having accomplished this. Not a lot of people are able to go through a 12-week course like this on critical thinking and survive, but you have. Not to count our chickens before they're hatched, but the fact that you are to this point in the term means you have a pretty good chance of passing and doing relatively well in the course. So we'll look at the film Pleasantville, which you have watched for today's lecture and for the final exam. And we'll talk about the final exam. Try to get you ready to do well on the essay questions. Okay, so let's briefly describe what to expect on the final. You're going to have 50 multiple choice questions and 2 essay questions. The multiple choice questions will primarily come from quiz 3 and 4 in the material we have learned since quiz 4. So I highly recommend you review quiz 3, 4 questions, and then take a look at your notes to review the material since quiz 4. The essay questions, they will be 2 types. The first comes from the film Pleasantville, and the second is a more generic essay question. Hopefully you've read the final exam preparation worksheet, so you know exactly what the questions are. We'll go ahead and review them quickly in this video and discuss them to help you prepare for them. But my suggestion is that you outline your responses to all of these questions. By outlining them, you can maybe get a sense for which ones you feel are easier, which ones you'd like to spend more time on, which ones you feel more comfortable writing a final exam response to. But I'd outline them all first because you may not really understand how well you know a question, how much you like answering a question before outlining it. So definitely outline first. For the first essay question that refers to the film Pleasantville, make sure that regardless of which question you choose to respond to, that you demonstrate an understanding of the philosophical argument from the readings that the question refers to. So you have questions on faith and morality and free will, and each of those questions asks you to compare the film to the philosophical argument that was in each of the articles you read for last week, right? So you have a question on free will, a question on morality, a question on faith, and for each of those, I ask you to tell me what the film might say about those arguments. So part of this question is testing how well you understand those arguments. So be sure you explain Coyne's argument against free will if you choose to answer the free will question. Be sure to explain Long's argument for faith. Make sure to, if you answer the faith question, be sure to explain Singer's argument with regards to charity if you describe or answer the morality question. Okay? Those questions are asking partly to demonstrate your understanding of those arguments. All right. So the first essay question, you have 3 options to choose from. You could choose to answer the question with regards to morality, choose to answer the question with regards to faith, or you can choose to answer the question with regards to free will. So let's take a look at the morality question first. Discuss some of the moral choices made by characters. You know, there's Bud, there's Mary Sue, there's Betty, George Parker, etc. throughout the film, and address the following questions. First, how would you describe the morality of these characters prior to turning colored? By the end of the film, what argument does the film make regarding what our standards of morality should be? And then, in what ways does the film support or object to Peter Singer's argument for extreme charity, as depicted in our class reading? So you should have a paragraph for each of those 2 parts, right? So let's start at the top here. Discuss some of the moral choices made by the characters. Well, if we take a look at Pleasantville, the TV show, how would you describe the morality of the people of Pleasantville? Well, in a very literal sense, morality to them is really black and white, right? It's very clear what good is and what bad is. It's very clear what the morally right thing is and what the immoral thing is. And we see that with like the city council members as the movie progresses. We see them try to hold on to this notion of a clear sense of right and wrong. So Describe that. Give us examples when you write about this in your essay response. What are some examples in which the townspeople, the people in Pleasantville, literally have a morality that's black and white, right? Very clear distinction between right and wrong, good and bad. Let's take a look at Bud, right? When we see Bud slash David at the beginning of the film, how would you describe his sense of right and wrong? Well, he gravitates towards Pleasantville. Right? He has the sense that there is a right and wrong in the world, and we see that in the very beginning of the film, especially when they first get into Pleasantville. Right? He's enjoying being in this town, living in this black and white world, in this show that he knows everything about. And when Mary Sue decides to upend the town, right? She goes. We're in the high school, I think. And Bud confronts her, or maybe this is on the street. Bud confronts her and says, you can't do this to them, right? Meaning you can't help all of these people within the town turn colored. He said, you can't do this to them, Mary Sue. The reason he gives is because when you do this to them, you are changing their world, right? So David's idea of ethics comes from, what's best for other people. Right? He has a sense that you can't do that to them. We have to worry about other people in our idea of right and wrong. Well, look at Mary Sue's behavior. Look at Jennifer's behavior. What is her guiding principle for ethics and morality? Is it necessary to think about others first? Well, no. We see her throughout the first half of the film, at least, do things for herself. We see that her sense of right and wrong, or her sense of what to do with one's life, or the choices one should make, isn't about doing good for other people. We see her doing good for herself. So there's some contrast here with regards to what the right and wrong thing to do is between Bud and Mary Sue, David and Jennifer. Okay, now can you relate this to the argument that Coyne provides? Or I should help you with the second part of this. But at the end of the film, what argument does the film make regarding what our standards of morality should be? So throughout the film, we see things change, don't we? Don't we see David's sense, Bud's sense of morality change, the town's sense of morality change? The idea of right and wrong might change a little bit. Is it as clear at the end of the film as it is in the beginning, what right and wrong is? We see Mary Sue change, don't we? Don't we see the idea of morality change from being about what's good for oneself to something maybe a little greater? So give examples of this. Give examples of this and describe to me what you think the film is saying by the end of it. What is the film saying about morality standards, about what makes something right and wrong, what we should do in terms of choices we make in our lives? What's the film saying about ethics here? Now compare this to Peter Singer's argument. Do you think the film would support Singer's argument for extreme charity? Now, what you should do first is explain the argument, right? Remember, it's an inductive analogy. What is Singer's argument? Focus on the Bugatti example as opposed to the door example, because that's really his argument. Okay? Would the film support Singer's argument that we should give to charity as much as we can up to the point where we need funds to live, right? Does the film say that's what we should do, or does the film say something different? Okay. Next question. Reason versus faith. Discuss how the type of life desired by various characters, particularly Bud/David, and the citizens of Pleasantville prior to and after turning colored, changes throughout the film, and address the following questions. Okay, for the first paragraph, you should describe the following. How is the debate between reason and faith, as discussed in our class, depicted in the film? How is this debate related to the loss of innocence depicted in the film? And then the second paragraph, in what ways does the film support or object to Long's, which is really William James's, argument for why belief on faith alone is sometimes justified? Okay, so let's take a look at this first part. How is the debate between reason and faith depicted in the film? Well, remember, the way we've looked at this debate between reason and faith through the Long article was to talk about how sometimes it is useful, says Long, to have a belief on faith alone. It is useful. It gives us, it helps us create truth. It helps us to discover truth. It helps to motivate us. It helps to give us courage to do something. To have faith isn't necessarily just to believe something without reason, but to have faith is to be okay with the unknown, right? So that you can make a decision to venture out into unknown territory, even though there's no evidence to support whether or not that decision is a good or bad one. We looked at things like, should you marry this person? Should you have this operation? We looked at the example of the little train that could, little engine that could. And the idea that Long brings up is that, having a belief on faith helps us sometimes discover what the truth is. Right? It kind of can give us hope to venture out into unknown territory, because known territory is safe, right? Known territory makes sense to us. Because when we have all the reasons to understand something, then we feel good. We feel as if there's nothing to worry about. When we venture into the unknown, we're venturing into places where we don't have reasons, where we don't have all the evidence. So it's scary, right? So with that discussion, that framework for reason versus faith, can you see that depicted in the film? Well, hopefully you see this every time somebody turns color, right? They lose their innocence. So describe various scenes where we see people turn color. Describe where they lose innocence. Can you see how that's reflective of going from a state where everything is known, where you have the reasons and evidence to believe things, right, to places that are unknown? When we see people turn color, they're going into new territory where there's not a lot of evidence to support whether this is a good thing to do, whether there's no reason to believe that this new thing you're trying is going to work, right? You just have to believe on faith alone, seemingly. So think about all those times where that happens, where people turn color. We see within the town kind of this movement towards that Mary Sue kind of initiates, right? She's like this change agent that starts turning everything, turning people into colors. The town reacts. A lot of the town council people and the elderly within the town kind of are acting scared of this change, right? They want to hold on to their order. They want to hold on to what is known. They don't like the unknown. They don't like the town changing into something they're not familiar with. So we see this tension, right, between sticking to what we know, what's rational, to moving and taking a leap into the unknown, which requires faith to do that. Can you give us examples of that tension between those two forces? I mean, there's a reason why when you take a look at the decree towards the middle end of the film that the town council brings out, right? The decree about, you shouldn't go read certain books at the library, or, they have this whole book burning scene, that you can't go to Lover's Lane. I mean, what's wrong with Lover's Lane? What's wrong with reading books? What do those two things represent with regards to this whole debate about reason versus faith? Can you see how they might be related? Yeah. If we take a look at both Mary Sue and Bud, can you see how they represent the two sides of this issue? Why does Bud love Pleasantville? It's familiar, right? Everything is structured and safe. He knows every single episode, right? And he enjoys that. He enjoys that order. He enjoys that structure. He enjoys that familiarity. On the other hand, Mary Sue is agent of chaos. She doesn't like the structure. She doesn't like the order. She doesn't like the familiarity, right? Bud likes to stick with the known. Bud is much more a representative of reason here, right? Evidence-based and reason-based before making a choice and decision. Think about the beginning of the film. What happens in their real-world high school? What do we see Bud do? And then take a look at Mary Sue, how she jumps in and displays faith in her ability to ask somebody out, right? Now, why do they do this? Why do they have those behaviors? If you remember, they both come from a family where it's a little bit unstable, right? Father has left, no father figure. The family is kind of a broken home. And these are the two ways that they've coped with that situation. Bud's way is to gravitate towards structure and familiarity. Mary Sue's way is to gravitate towards chaos and disorder. That's how they compensate for the type of family they grew up in. Now, if we take a look as the film progresses, can you see what the film is saying about that relationship between reason and faith? Right? In what ways does the film support or object to Long's argument? You can see what the film eventually says. Then you'll be able to see what it says about Long's argument. Remember, Long's argument says, yes, there are reasons, there are times in which you are justified in believing based off faith alone. Does the film seem to support that by the end? Or does the film say, no, 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 no. You have to have reason and evidence. You should stick to what's familiar, right? Every once in a while, it's okay, or it's not. There is no situation where it's okay to take a leap of faith. Hopefully this is obvious, right, what the film is saying about this, especially with that last scene, right? That last scene is really ambiguous. It's kind of open-ended. That should be a big hint as to which side of this debate the film leans towards. Third question, free will. Reflect on the behaviors of the citizens of Pleasantville and discuss how the film explores the notion of free will. First paragraph in your response, in what ways does the film support or object to Coyne's argument for the non-existence of free will? Be sure to address both parts of Coyne's definition of free will. Okay, so let's talk about this first paragraph first. Okay, so when looking at the film and seeing if it supports or objects to Coyne's argument, let's take a look at any examples in the film where we see free will or non-free will. Remember Coyne's image of free will? He says, imagine rolling the tape back on your life to a particular point, and given that everything is the same within your life at that point, could you have chosen a different path? Could you have made a different choice? Well, don't we see that played out in the film? We are seeing Bud watch this television show, Pleasantville, and he's entering a contest to test whether or not he knows everything about the show, meaning everything about the show is predetermined. All the characters have quote-unquote choices that are already made, right? There is no deviating from the choice the character makes within the show. That's how a person can win the competition, because they've seen all the shows, so they know exactly what's going to happen. So at the beginning, the characters in Pleasantville seem to have no free will. So describe that in your response. Give specific examples of when we see the lack of free will in the film, in the TV show, in the film. So how does free will happen? Where do we see examples of the characters within the TV show start to exhibit free will? Well, we see it only when something outside of the reality comes in, don't we? Don't we only see exhibit free will when something outside of their reality, Mary, Sue, and Bud, David and Jennifer, when they come into this thing? So there they are, here they are, this thing that's outside of the Pleasantville reality, and they come into their reality. Isn't that the only time we see free will occur? Can you see how that's related to Coyne's argument against free will? Can you see the parallel? In Coyne's argument, he doesn't believe in anything outside the material universe, right? Okay. Now, take a look at what the film now might be saying as a whole with regards to Coyne's argument. Does the film seem to say free will exists, or does the film seem to say no? Even though it seems as if the characters in the TV show are now exhibiting free will, they really aren't. Can you make a case for free will still existing even at the end as people turn color? Think about the chain of events that leads to this. Can you see how the film might be saying, no, free will really exists? Yeah. So talk about how we see freedom in the film or lack of freedom. Talk about how we see conscious choice in the film or lack of conscious choice. At the beginning, the TV characters, are they conscious? Is there any point in the film where the TV characters become self-aware, become conscious, become more than characters that a screenwriter wrote to say certain lines? Okay. At the end of the film, does it look like there are people that can freely and consciously make choices? If you say yes, then obviously the film is against Coin. If you say no, then you're saying that the film is aligned with Coin. Okay. Second part, the second paragraph, based on what we see in the film, why might some people not want free will to exist? What arguments does the film seem to be making regarding the significance of free will? So throughout the movie, we see the towns, like the city council members, the older men in the town fight against change, right? They want to keep things the same. They don't want unpredictable behaviors, right? Why would they want that? Why would they want things to stay the same? Why would we not want free will to exist? Okay, think about that for a second, write a response to that. And then what arguments does the film seem to be making regarding the significance of free will? Free will seems to be a very important thing to the filmmakers, right, of Pleasantville. The exercising of free will seems to be a very important thing. Can you see why? Can you see how? Provide specific scenes from the film to back up your observation about what the filmmakers might be saying about free will. Okay. Now, I'll give you my actual interpretation of this in a second, but whatever you think is true about the film and free will, I want you to make sure you stick to that regardless of what I'm about to say and provide evidence to support your claim. Okay. So what is the main argument you think the film is making? So our whole class revolves around arguments, right? Revolves around what's the main point of something? What are the reasons somebody has for believing something? So what's the film trying to make us believe, you think? What's the film trying to tell us about life? What are the reasons the film believes for justifying these main claims? Now, we're going to come back to this in a second because this is kind of important when discussing the second essay question. So the essay question is about thinking critically about your life decisions. So for most of our class, we have focused on understanding, analyzing, critiquing arguments or pseudo-arguments made by others. The purpose of this was to develop the skill to think critically about the arguments presented by others in order to make rational decisions. It's not just by others, right? Arguments we make to ourselves and others in order to make rational decisions and avoid being misled. Your final exam, you will be asked to think critically about your own life in the question below. Reflect on a difficult decision you are personally facing or will face in the near future that may have momentous consequences for your life. So nothing trivial. Think about some big things you have to choose soon, right? A decision you believe will have a profound impact on your quality of living, right? Your experience of happiness. So think about that. What is a question, a problem, an issue you are facing soon or facing right now? And I want you to analyze the argument or arguments you have been thinking about pertaining to this decision. In the first paragraph, I want you to do the following. Identify what the issue is and the premises for coming to a possible conclusion, a possible decision. This could be anything momentous for you. Maybe you're debating about whether or not to continue with this long-term relationship. Maybe you're debating about whether or not to enroll in another class at De Anza. Maybe you're thinking about what university for your college you should go to. Maybe you're thinking about career. What career should you invest yourself in? Maybe you're thinking about moving. Where should you live? Anything major that you think has a dramatic impact on your life, this is your chance to think carefully about it. Identify the issue and the reasons you have for coming to a certain decision. What kind of argument did you just give yourself? Is it an inductive argument or a deductive argument? Identify that. And then try to analyze the quality of that argument. If it's deductive, is it a valid one? Does your decision have to be the case, given the reasons you're thinking about? If it's an inductive argument, well, analyze how the quality of this argument. Is it an argument from analogy? Well, then see if the terms are similar. Is it an inductive syllogism? Well, look at most are, right? Look at that term and see how large most are means, 90%, 60%, to look at the quality of the argument. Is it an inductive generalization? Well, you have lots of things to think about here with regards to confidence and sample size, margins of error, right? So think about these things and evaluate the quality of your argument. In your rational thinking, when you are thinking about this argument, can you spot any fallacies that are embedded in how you are looking at this argument? Okay, so discuss that in your first paragraph. In the second paragraph, I want you to take a look at your premises and critique your premises. Is there anything wrong with your premises? Is there anything that you can question with your premises? Is there anything that you're taking for granted that may not be true about your premises? And in particular, I want you to address the following influences. In what way do outside influences make you feel as if your freedom is limited? A lot of times we're making choices because we don't feel like we have other options, or we feel as if this is something we have to do, or this is something we have to want. Is that really true? Right? Take a look how much of your decision is impacted by your experience or lack of experience with freedom. 2, how might your moral standards be influencing your decision? When you take a look at this argument you've made for doing something, are you taking into account what you think is right and wrong? Are you taking into account what you value in life and whether or not you are making a choice towards that? Maybe the choice that you think you should make is going away from what you think is right in the world or what you think is good in the world. Think about this for a second. And third, in what ways does faith or having a lack of faith play a part in your decision? Take a look at your argument. The way your argument is structured, are you moved to a certain decision because you have a lack of faith in the unknown? Because you have a lack of evidence or reason to believe something you haven't tried before? Is there anything about your decision that's really coming not from logic per se, but that's coming from you not having the courage to step outside of your boundaries? Okay? Think about that as you critique your premises for your argument. So really, the point of our class, as I mentioned, is to think carefully about the choices and decisions you make. Right? It can be choices for your life or just choices on what to believe in. Morality, faith, free will, they all play a part. They all are an aspect of you making your choice. But if you haven't noticed, a lot of the choices we make aren't really conscious choices. Right? A lot of the choices we make don't really come from us rationally thinking about the question. So hopefully, this is your opportunity to step back and to think carefully about a choice you are about to make. Now, what do I mean that a lot of our choices aren't conscious? That a lot of our choices aren't from reason? Because it doesn't seem like we reason our way through a decision. It turns out that a lot of our choices are unconscious. A lot of our choices don't come from logic and reason, but come from intuition or emotion or feeling. Let's assume you brushed your teeth this morning. I'm not going to judge you if you didn't, but just to pretend like you brushed your teeth this morning. Can you think back? How many of you consciously chose which tooth to brush first? Did you wake up, go to the bathroom and go, I'm going to brush my left molar first? Chances are you didn't think about it. Chances are you brushed your teeth rather unconsciously. You just went in there and just did it. And your conscious mind probably wandered to something else. You're probably thinking of something other than brushing your teeth. You just went in there and did it out of habit. Right? Let's assume you're wearing pants right now. Well, you're at home, you're someplace, maybe you're not wearing pants, but let's assume you're wearing pants right now. How many of you consciously chose which leg to put in your pants first? Chances are you just did it. You just put on your pants. You didn't really think or make the conscious choice, I'll put my left leg in first. No, it just happened. And you were probably thinking of something else other than putting your pants on when you were putting your pants on. A lot of our behaviors are like this. They're kind of automatic. They're habitual. Right? It turns out that a lot of our thinking and decision-making is kind of like this too. Unconscious, habitual. So at the beginning of the textbook, you read about cognitive biases. And they show that a lot of our thinking is based upon heuristics. Right? Now, what are heuristics? Heuristics are mental shortcuts. They're ways for us to make decisions, come to judgments without thinking too much about them. Right? So they are general rules of thumb. They are things that our minds automatically do unconsciously. Yeah. So as we make a decision, as we make a choice, as we come to an assessment about whether or not a claim is true or false, we often don't think very carefully and rationally come to a choice about it. Our minds have mechanisms in which it can quickly come to a decision about believing a claim, in which it comes to a decision about which way to go when making a decision. That's more based upon emotion and intuition than it is about actual reason. So let's demonstrate this, okay? So you go to a bookstore, you're going to buy your textbook for a class. The textbook's required, okay? So you see the textbook on the bookstore shelf for 25 bucks, and then right next to the textbook is right next to you is standing a person, and the person says, hey, I just got a call from my buddy across the street at the other bookstore, and we just found out you can get this same book for the text for the class for 15 bucks instead of 25. It would just require you to go to the other store. Okay, how many of you would stay at this bookstore and buy this book for 25 versus going across the street, spending some time and effort going across the street and just buying this other book for 15 bucks, right? How many of you would stay here and spend 25, and how many of you would go across the street and spend 15? Okay. Take a mental note for yourself. Take a look at another scenario. Okay, let's take a look at another scenario. You're trying to get ready for a job interview. It's a really important job interview for you, and you want to make a good impression when you go into the interview. So you say, I need to buy a good suit. I got to look good when I go to this interview. So you go to a store that sells suits, Men's Warehouse, Macy's, I don't know, pick your favorite store, Nordstrom's, and you see the perfect suit that fits you, that you know, oh, this looks great on me. And you see it for $455. It just so happens that somebody standing right next to you is looking at that same suit, and they tell you, wait, I saw that suit, exact same suit at the other store, exact same size, for $445. Right? What do? Do you stay here and buy this suit for $455, or do you take the time and effort to go to the other store and buy it for $445? Okay. Now, usually, statistically speaking, in this scenario right here, less people would go and buy the suit 15 minutes away than the people that would go 15 minutes away to buy the cheaper textbook, right? More people would go to buy the textbook than to go across the street and buy the suit. But do you see anything interesting about these numbers here? The textbook, in this case, if you'd go across the street, you'd save $10 on the textbook across the street. The suit across the street, you'd save the exact same amount of money, $10. Rationally speaking, shouldn't your decision on whether or not to cross the street be solely dependent on how much money you save, how much your time is worth? In which case, if you raise your hand for the first scenario to go across the street and buy the book, you should have also raised your hand to go across the street to buy the suit, because they both save you $10. Well, what's happening here? For the most part, we don't think logically about this. We thought about perceived value, right? $10 versus a textbook's worth $25. That seems like you're saving a lot of money. While saving $10 from a $455 suit, that's the $10 is a small percentage of the $455. So it seems like the perception feels like you're not saving as much money. But that's not the right way to look at it, is it? That's not the rational way to look at it, isn't it? Because what you are sacrificing is just time and effort. And in both cases, you are saving $10 for the amount of time and effort it takes you to go across the street. It seems to simply be the case that we make our decision on this emotional, intuitive reaction to perceived value, rather than rationally thinking about how much our time is worth. Which is why when we take a look at sales and how companies market their products, which marketing strategy sells more, do you think? If I said, buy 2 pair for $4 versus free pair of socks with purchase of a pair for $4. The second way of marketing sells more. Why? Because the word free is in there, even though the socks are being sold for the same amount, right? The second way of marketing it sells more because emotionally, intuitively, we have a certain response to the word free, right? We can rationalize it. Remember the fallacy? We can rationalize it, say to ourselves, oh, we're saving a lot of money because it's free. But that's not really the case, right? That's not necessarily the case. The free just kind of biases us to think we are saving more money. Just like the value here of $455 for this suit can have a negative effect and bias us towards thinking $10 to go across the street isn't as large of a savings as if or as when the purchase price would be smaller, $25 item. Yeah. This question was actually posed to physicians. They were asked, hey, a new medical procedure has a death rate of 7% within 5 years, meaning within a 5-year span after doing this medical procedure, people die at a rate of 7%. Would you recommend it to patients? Now, assume no context here other than, this procedure saves money, right? So maybe this is why they're offering it to physicians. Hey, offer this to your patients. Maybe this would save them some money. Would you recommend it to patients? Okay. Doctors would say yes or no. Later on, they were given the following question. A new medical procedure has a survival rate of 93% within 5 years, meaning within a 5-year span, people that do this procedure, they survive at a rate of 93%. The doctors were asked the same question. Would you recommend this procedure to your patients? Physicians voted to recommend one of these more than the other. Can you guess which one? They were more likely to recommend this procedure than they would this previous procedure. Do you see anything interesting about the number, about the data? They are saying the same thing. Death rate of 7% is the same thing as saying survival rate of 93%. But because of how the question was phrased, death rate versus survival rate, the language influenced what they thought was the logical choice, what they thought was the rational choice, what they thought was the better choice. The phrasing, the word choice, influenced how they looked at the problem, right? This is the whole idea of rhetoric that we looked at in class. That we aren't just logically processing creatures, we are emotional creatures. We're creatures that make choice based upon not just reason and logic, but based upon how our psychology works, based upon our feelings. It turns out that a lot, if not a majority, of our decisions are the result of these sorts of mechanisms. Psychological habits, emotional responses. Take a look to see how unconscious this is. A truck driver was going against traffic down a one-way street. A police officer saw the truck driver but didn't stop him or give him a ticket. Why not? Why not? Think about this in your head. Okay? So automatically, when you see the scenario, the mind paints a picture of it. That's how it understands it, right? Logic, reason, is about taking that picture you have and seeing if something fits in that picture, right? If something doesn't fit in that picture, we say it's irrational. We say it's illogical because it doesn't make sense to what we already know of the world. So what's going on here? It doesn't make sense for the police officer not to give him a ticket because that goes against our understanding of what's happening here. It goes against all of our presuppositions that we believe to be true when given this scenario. In your head, you're probably seeing a truck driver in his truck going down a one-way street in the opposite direction of the arrow, right? There's nothing here that says the truck driver was driving his truck. The truck driver could have been walking down the opposite direction on one-way street. Do you see how quickly our minds came to a assessment, a judgment about what was happening here? Do you see how unconscious that process was of coming to a picture of what the scenario is telling us? It's a heuristic. It's a shortcut. With these words, we're so used to making, we're so used to these words meaning a certain thing that we automatically came to this image about the truck driver driving down the street, right? When that's not what was precisely said here. So this leads to the main point of the film. Lots of ways of interpreting this. You go online, you can see lots of papers, philosophical papers written about Pleasantville. But two things I'd like to point out. One, the film seems to be making this point that to be alive, to be really alive, and not just like That's just like a robotic character in a TV show that has all their actions and lines predetermined. To be really alive, you need to think critically about what you believe so that you can make your own choice. Whether we have the ability to do that or not, different question. But the film seems to say that to be alive means thinking carefully about what it is you believe and what you do so that you can make your own choice. Otherwise, you are no different than characters with predetermined lives in a film or a TV show. The second thing, related, is it seems to say that a full human life is one in which there's a balance between both order and chaos, right? A lot of our class deals with order, having reasons to believe a claim, right? We want to see that nice, orderly argument, which is good, because when you have reasons to believe a conclusion, we limit the chance of error. But when we take a look at the film, we see David really want order, really want structure. And we notice that towards the end, he now gravitates towards the opposite end of the spectrum, where he realizes that chaos is kind of important. That to live a full life, you can't just live the way you've always lived. That you have to venture out, be willing to tear down how you thought life could be in order to build something new on your own, right? So you need order, but you also need chaos. With Mary Sue, with Jennifer, we see her being this agent of chaos. And towards the end of the film, she only changes color when she's able to what? Embrace order in her life, embrace responsibility, embrace structure. Film seems to be saying that life has these two components in them, that we can't just lean towards one or the other. So while the whole course has been about reason and justifying your beliefs and justifying decisions, which is very good, I'd like you to think about how that's one side of living life. The other side is being able to venture out into chaos and to not be afraid of a little mess, right? To not be afraid to venture out and try new things, new experiences, even though there's no reason or evidence to back up whether or not you'll have a good time or whether or not it's worthwhile to do. You need to ride that razor's edge between order and chaos. And when you do that, that's kind of when life can be really meaningful. Arguments and rationality help us make life seem not so scary because then life seems orderly. Life makes sense. But on the other hand, you don't want life to be completely revealed to you without any mystery. Otherwise, it gets kind of dull and boring. And to be honest, life is relatively ambiguous, right? There's not always the right or wrong thing to do with your career. There's not always a clear black and white thing to do with your relationship or with how to make money or with, what school to go to. Right? There's not necessarily a right and wrong answer. So you have to be able to live on that razor's edge between the chaos and the order. That seemingly is what the film is saying. And my advice to you moving forward is hopefully you've built up your skills in order to maintain order in your life, in order to figure out the reasons why you should believe something and do something so that that is with you as a skill set. But then don't also be afraid to do things that are outside of what makes sense to you every once in a while. That between order and chaos, that between making choices and decisions with reason and evidence and making choices venturing out into the unknown, that in between, maybe we call that wisdom, right? Because when you live long enough, you develop the intuition on how to balance those two things, how to integrate those two things. And my hope for you is that this class gets you slowly started on your way to developing that wisdom. Because philosophy, if you look at the term, what it means is the pursuit or love of wisdom. So I wish you well as you start to prepare for your final exam, but more importantly, as you start to embark on life after our class. I hope this class has been of some use to you. I hope to see you in a future philosophy class or a future humanities class. And if not, feel free to stop by anytime. Stop by office hours and just say hi. I'd be curious to see how you're doing. Okay? Good luck to you.